So we are going to wrap up today. Again, want to thank all the speakers today. Can't do it without our sponsors. And also a huge shout out to our team, Nell and Nicole and Noelle. I know a lot of you guys have interacted with them, and they've been great, and they make all this stuff happen behind the scenes because Jim, Scott, and I cannot pull that off. We wanted to try one more kind of new wrinkle. And this is really kind of the first time we've had what we call kind of a product showcase. And what we wanted to see when we were talking, and this has been going on since the pandemic, quite honestly. Every time we come to LA, it seemed like there was new wellness brands, new beauty brands, a lot of D2C, and a lot of global interest right out of the gate. So we were like, well, let's see if we can't pull together some experts from the beauty, wellness category, and help them communicate to some of the other verticals where there might be common causes, common opportunities, and where things might be unique to the beauty category. So Bernice could not make it today. Bernice has been a big supporter of us over the years. She's come down with the flu, fortunately. Weird to say that now. It's like, oh, it's just the flu. But I'm pleased to have Jessica and Denise here. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing. We were on the phone yesterday as they were driving up, and I would have liked to just stayed on the phone with them for like 4 hours because they had all these interesting little stops along the way, successful stops too. So why don't you say a quick hello, and then we'll kind of jump into the conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm Jessica Quick, one of the co-founders and managing partners at Buzz Beauty. I love that you called our beauty section a wrinkle because that's something we actively try to avoid. But we're here today, as you talked about, to talk about the beauty space. And throughout the day, we've seen lots of statistics showing how important beauty and wellness is on the online space. So if you're not in beauty and you can possibly parallel to it, we recommend it. I have a long background in beauty. I started at Dermalogica in the international department. My first international trip many years ago was without a cell phone and without a laptop, and get on a plane and call us when you get to the hotel. So from there, catapulted over to Revlon, and then from Revlon started Buzz Beauty with my co-founder here, and we'll talk about Buzz, but more importantly, beauty in the international space.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Today has been just an amazing day, so congratulations to all of you that have been involved with this. We're thrilled to be here. My name is Denise Dente. I am also the co-founder of Buzz Beauty, and I have literally been born and raised in the beauty business and in a family of entrepreneurs. So I have a particular passion and a love for all people that take that entrepreneurial journey and that risk. I started out in the beauty business with a lot of entrepreneurs that have since moved on and sold their brands to very, very large companies. And it has been just a pleasure working in hair, skin, nails. My first international journey started, I think it's been 20-some years ago. And I still go back and forth to Italy, which is what I'm passionate about, and working with an Italian brand. So been in hair, skin, nails, and then at Revlon, and had the opportunity to work there running 90-plus countries around the world, working with Jessica, also one of your other first speakers, Stephanie, that's in the room as well, and have just loved helping brands grow, accelerate, and when they're ready for that international journey, helping them get there.
Yeah, so, there was a reason Bernice was going to moderate, so she wouldn't think things like wrinkles are positive. But, for guys, wrinkles are, you start to look like Harrison Ford, John Wayne, a seasoned, weathered old guy.
John Wayne. All right.
Anyway.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was, we've got lots of different models and frameworks and things like that we've introduced. These guys have got a very, well, I won't say different really, but you don't see like the eShop world trajectory up or the the maturity curve that the Global guys. But I think in some ways it's actually very similar. It's this idea of the importance of preparation, doing your homework. I thought Joy from Ritual did a really good job. And we barely even scratched. I mean, she could have talked a half hour on the market planning that they did before they went into their different markets. So why don't you guys give us a quick overview of the best practice framework here, and then we're going to kind of drop into each one of the different colored balls. And I'll weigh in a little bit with some of the insights that Bernice had shared with us, just so that we don't lose her voice as well. But why don't we jump right into it?
Sure. So I think you've heard today that every brand and every company has their own path and has their own journey. We've heard, kind of move low and slow all the way through to just accelerate and just go.
Right.
And every company has a path that's right for them. And it's really about picking the path for you. And so when we work with our clients, that's the first thing we really sit down and do is let's sit down and talk about what path is the most comfortable for you. And so we have a framework. It kind of moves around a little bit depending on the entrepreneur, but basically we cover kind of these 4 areas of what do you need to do to prepare to go international? Then how are we going to help protect your brand? Then we've got to go into the marketplace, and some people go slow and some people go fast. And then there's grow. How do we grow and do it profitably? And that's been a big subject for today. So those are kind of the 4 areas that we really focus on.
Yeah, and with our clients as well, we really merge with them wherever they are. And in some cases, we have clients, we like to say startups to scale ups. So they might have already started preparation, they might have already been in some level of protection, and then how can we take their capabilities, their end goals, and help them either do the first model of test and learn or go quickly and fast and accelerate. They probably have some key investors that they have to answer to. So what we really look at, as we've been saying all day today, is it is very much company and brand specific, but we're able to do it with a framework in order to make them as successful with as minimal loss in resources as possible.
So to kind of level set, and again, when Jim and I opened up today, we were like, boy, we don't usually highlight, figures in the red, but, that's where we're at. It's been an interesting year. We had the boom, the comps are really hard. I mean, you'll talk to anybody out there, and it's like our biggest challenge was, how do we beat those 2021 numbers? Bernice and I were talking, she was like, well, it's a lot tougher to secure funding now. The retailers aren't willing to take the risk on stocking new brands. So there's this whole idea that not only are they less willing to take the risk, they don't even want to experiment right now. They've got somebody looking over their shoulder as well. Brands are being held more accountable. We had that slide earlier with the global marketing session where we had the knowledgeable customer. They want transparency. I thought Alex did a great job closing the first session with this. It's all about building trust with your distributors. So, we showed some headwinds as far as the strong dollar and things like that. So as you kind of talk about preparing in today's climate, what's kind of changed? Where are you guys kind of grounding people in today's reality without forgetting what Jim just talked about, which is Patrick's reading the tea leaves in Avalera and China's on its way back. So how do you balance that kind of headwinds with the kind of the golden path ahead?
I think it also starts with the brand and the brand founder.
Right.
What is it that they are looking to achieve? And that's one of our first questions in this preparation phase is, what is your intention? Is your intention to, grow and sell your brand? Is your intention to keep it for a couple of generations and you want to, hand it down to your kids? And so each of these founders and partners that we work with come and start from a different point of view. So what headwinds they might be experiencing will partially depend on where it is that they want to go and what type of sails they need to sail into that wind with. So that's really that preparation. That's kind of one of the first things is understanding, what it is that they want to achieve.
Kind of know yourself.
Yeah, and then from there, we always like to go to competitive set and pricing, because those are two things that you can do in your own time at your computer, at your desk, with limited resources. And even if you've already started in international markets, you're already, maybe you're going, but it's a good time to stop and really understand who is your target consumer, what is your price point in market, and what are your competitive sets, price points, what are they winning on, really taking a look at that foundation information, which is why we put it in prepare. It doesn't matter where you are, but you have to have that basic information, especially in this consumer goods space, because you are going head to head with some of the biggest marketing budgets out there. And if you can know your space, know your pricing, know your competitive set, know where they're winning, then you can start to formulate a more cohesive plan to your brand that's going to better set you up for success, without, trying to figure out what agencies to bring on and how much money you need to be spending and how are you going to get into China and how much will that cost. Literally, you can start with step one at your own desk.
Yeah, I think know your tools too. And so Brian, a great point in the last session. There's a ton of tools out there, and they're not expensive. I mean, Google's got some great tools for understanding international markets. And I thought Ben did a great job. I mean, Ben was basically saying analytics are the framework. And I mean, it was very different. A lot of people are like, oh, well, let's measure how our strategy works. It's like, no, your strategy is your analytics. So great points there. Anything else on the kind of prepare button to point out? And again, all of these lessons are transferable, whether you're selling T-shirts or whether you're selling wellness, nutritional products and things like that.
I would say understanding your capabilities.
Yeah.
And really owning those capabilities from the standpoint of being very honest with yourself. Yes, you can do this, that, or the other thing, but do you do it well? Is an area that you can win in? So just really being honest with yourself of capabilities. Do I have the resources and assets that I need, or do I need to beef those up before I'm really ready to go global?
So we talked a little bit about protect, kind of the brand protection piece. I know you and I had a long conversation when kind of the first time we met.
One of my favorite topics.
And to Patrick from Avalera's point, compliant, it's not just protecting the brand from, the boogeyman or something like that. It's protecting them from the increasingly regulatory bodies that are out there looking to squeeze every dollar that they can. Rightly or wrongly. But yeah, walk us through a little bit of the protect part of the framework.
Yeah, and this is what makes it really interesting in the consumer goods space is when we talk about protect and regulatory, we really have three components. We are talking about regulatory compliance at the wet goods level. What is in your formula? Can it go into that market? Especially today, governments are getting very specific. There's long lists of regulatory rules. So we want to make sure that your formula is compliant. The next goes to packaging. Is your packaging compliant? And then the last piece is shipping compliancy, right? And so you have different tools in the market. You have different people you can turn to as experts, but they are going to be typically in their lane. So when you ask a shipping company, are we compliant? And they say yes, know that they're saying that from we can put your products in a box and we can throw it over the wall and ship it.
Right.
That is not the same thing as the formula being compliant. And again, these are things that we can do from the beginning. And from a protection standpoint, why that matters is you may have already started shipping and you've been doing it for a year or two. Great, you've got 100K in sales in Germany and it seems like it's going great until they come and they find you. And they will. And so how then are you set up to either already be addressing that, or you already have new product underway or new labels, and really just trying to make sure that your path forward has as least of the obstacles as you can prior to that.
The other thing that comes up is when you're successful in market and you've been shipping and everything's going fine, you may have a B2B partner from the last conversation. A B2B partner comes in and says, I've seen your brand, it's doing really well, I'd love to pick you up. And then you're caught on your heels and you're not ready because you haven't done kind of the compliance things. So it is good to start working on that sooner than later and set yourself up for success. Right. Because that's the whole intention, is to be uber successful in as many markets as you want to be in.
And I love the conversation that we just had on the previous panel about Amazon, because while it's an amazing revenue stream, the other big benefit that we see with Amazon is it's a protection mechanism.
Right.
We talked a bit about the brand registry, but look, if you can get on brand registry, if you can be on Amazon and own your space, it is just as much about making it a revenue stream as it is about protecting your IP, your trademarks. It makes it way easier to defend if you do find counterfeit or you find people that are selling that are unauthorized within those governments. Then you've got this proof that you're there, you've already filed your right paperwork, you're doing all the right things, you're better likely to control that legal aspect. And one of our favorite sayings we talk about a lot is, there is no trademark police. There is no patent police.
Right.
You are the one responsible for your brand. So if there is somebody infringing, you are the one that has to find them and then hire the attorneys and do the cease and desist letters. And in this case, having a marketplace partner in which you own that space, you have one more ally in your corner to help you protect. And that is really an important part.
And speaking of the protection and the fact that there, is no police that's going to come to the door and say you're infringing, you also have to decide what appetite you have to protect it. Many times you may have a patent and you realize that somebody is breaking and in conflict with that, but you've really got to understand, am I going to pursue it? And what cost is that going to come at? Because if you're busy trying to build a business and also defend it, you're having to do offensive and defensive, and that can get very expensive. So in this protect piece, you also have to evaluate, what am I willing to do to protect it?
Yeah. There's also no green police anymore. And I guess a question for you guys is, 5 years ago, sustainability probably wasn't under the protect, and maybe it is somewhere else, or maybe it's, kind of horizontal across all of these now. But, the consumer is kind of the green police now, right? And it changes market to market. We had a great conversation about Nordic versus Korea and how the expectations for packaging. Tell us a little bit about kind of where that conversation has been coming up with your clients.
You're absolutely correct. There is no green police, and it does vary based on regions and what we call claims in our world. And so if we make a claim that something is clean or green, what that means in the US is not what it would mean necessarily in Europe. And it's really interesting, UK specifically has very strict guidelines on claims and what you can say. And we find sometimes brands get tripped up by how when they go into the UK, they have this beautiful package. It says highly moisturizing. They don't realize that's a claim, and then they ensue all of the after effects of that. But one of the things we learned early on with this sustainable story is now in some parts of the world, it is table stakes. You have to be sustainable. The Nordic region's a great example. When we start opening markets there and shipping product, they look at us and say, take all the packaging off. Why the heck do you have a component and then a unit carton and then a shipper, this and all the inside materials? And this is where the nuance of international becomes interesting, because in another part of the world like Korea or Japan, really beautiful detailed packaging is seen as something worth paying the extra price for. Denise has a great analogy. In our world, you can get a 99-cent red lipstick or you can get a $99 red lipstick, right? And so the difference in those two items comes down to ingredients and packaging and how it's presented and marketed. So you have to be aware of, in the international space, the nuances between some of these markets. It's an overgeneralization, obviously. Not everyone is exactly the same inside the market, but when we know and think about green and sustainable Western Europe, the standards that they have there, it's different than North America and different than Asia.
So is there any launch? So, and I know we'll bounce to the next one here because I know we're segueing into the go piece. So there's the question of, I think you've heard throughout the day, do you go deep into the core markets now? And I think, the conversations we've had over the last year is leaning a little bit more towards go deep, especially where there's already profits, versus the kind of go broad, which we've talked a lot about in years, especially before the pandemic. And even the True Classic story was a little bit, let's go do it all and, see what sticks. How does that work? I mean, are you finding some people that are just like, the green police are in those markets? I mean, is that pushing people away from some markets? I mean, they're probably not going to admit it, but we've had some really interesting conversations at some of our private dinners where, is the consumer really as green as they're made out to be? And when push comes to shove, they don't pay for the carbon offsets and things like that. So have you heard that at all as you guys are talking to clients about that? It's like, well, maybe we just, let's go to Korea. It's easy. It's like we can stick with our packaging. They like it. It's all good.
I would say that when we sit down and talk with these folks about where do we go and when do we go, there's a conversation about trying to match the priorities of the market and what the consumer wants and needs in those markets and where the brand is currently at right now. So if the brand, we've been talking to brands recently that are very much about sustainability and so forth, and they say, we want to go into Europe. And because they already have a sustainability story built in to the core of who the brand is, there's not much to change. We can go right into those Scandinavian markets. So really meeting customers where they're at in their hierarchy of what's important to them, and then matching that up with the brand's core philosophy. If the brand does not have a real good or strong sustainability story, then we don't want to change that right away.
Yeah.
We want to lean into things.
No, and we've heard some of even some of the shipping partners are like, we're not quite there yet, so we don't. We advise our company, we advise our clients. It's like, we're not going to be able to help you out. And even the Amazon store, I think the Attitude people will tell you a little bit they don't sell on Amazon because it doesn't kind of meet their criteria.
Yeah, this is a really common thing, and we have a great partner out of Canada, and it's a hair care brand that removed all the water from their formula. And we talked with them about Amazon, and that is exactly what we heard was, it's going to be a great partner, and when they figure out how to ship sustainably, when they figure out how to control some of this waste that happens in shipping. And, look, I applaud them. They have a point of view and they have a lane and they're in it. And so they're willing to forego the Amazon revenue and protection right now for their sustainable story. And so we try to leverage that in other areas of the business to grow that side, to say, look, we're not on Amazon for these reasons, but this is why we're a great fit for Western Europe. And this is why we're a great fit for you. Credo would be a perfect example. It's a specialty beauty store only specializing in clean beauty. They're in there for that reason.
Got it. So a little bit more on the go piece. So, we've talked about doing some testing, some entering markets. Again, I think what we've heard throughout the day is, yes, there's some markets, especially Canada and Mexico, that look inviting. China has, is not the story it once was, but maybe it will come roaring back. There's, opportunities in Europe. There's challenges. Where do you guys kind of see the testing going right now? Is it still kind of follow those English language markets for the most part?
It is. There's also some other indicators that the brand may have. Where are people coming from and shopping, whether they're on Shopify or something else. You can look at the data and discover, where people are coming from and who has some natural interest in the brand. So looking at that data is super important. The other piece goes back to where do you have similar customers? So if you're big in the US, then chances are the English-speaking countries, the Australias, UK, Ireland may be a natural course of action for you. And then there's also these things that come along that we refer to as opportunistic. There's strategic and opportunistic, where you're at an event, you're at a trade show, something happens, and somebody comes up to you with just an opportunity that really fits with who you are and it makes sense to do. Maybe it's somebody in the Middle East, maybe it's someone in Mexico, and you flush it out and you say, you know what, it wasn't part of our original strategy or where we thought we were going to go, but it does make a lot of sense and everything lines up.
Got it.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to that first conversation this morning in which I believe Stephanie said, we write our 5-year plan, we rewrote it, and this is what we find is you write your plan in pencil because things like opportunistic opportunities, you learn something, you thought, gosh, Australia would be the perfect next market after UK, but turns out it's far, it's got complications, regulatory-wise, you're not ready to enter, they're too strict for your product, and then you have to pivot and find the next right fit for your brand.
I know that one of the things when we talk to brands about, do you go fast and wide or do you go low and strategic? also has to do with their internal bandwidth. Because look, you're going to go out into the market and everything that you anticipated may not go exactly as you had planned. And you're going to have problems along the way that you hadn't even thought of, which means solving those problems. And so if you've got a lean internal team to solve problems, maybe operationally you don't have a lot of people, and you're all of a sudden in 40 countries, then you're solving 40 problems that you hadn't anticipated. So that may be a situation where you look at your internal organization and say, you know what, we do need to go a little bit slower and deeper because we need to get operationally efficient in those markets before we can actually accelerate and grow.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Bernice was going to kind of tackle that piece, the whole how do you build your digital team for global? And, we talked about, who are your first 5 hires, what's the right org design. You brought up a great point, Jessica, when we were talking about some of the D2C brands that have popped up here that weren't ready for omni-channel. We've actually had a couple speakers today during our prep calls. They're like, yep, we're hiring somebody. We're going to make the push into wholesale. And, oh, well, we haven't hired them yet. They're still consulting. So anything around just, kind of advice, especially advice that, kind of extends beyond the beauty and wellness category for who those first hires are, how to build that team so that you are ready when those opportunities come along.
Yeah, I think it definitely mimics what everyone has been saying from stage today, which really is, you're thinking about your capabilities as a company and what you have that you can offer strategically to the market, and then where your holes are. In the D2C space, we saw it with COVID. So many brands thankfully pivoted to D2C or started D2C. And then now, 3 years later, we're looking at saying, gosh, I'm not making it. I didn't pivot fast enough to a wholesale model. And what's interesting in this space of consumer goods, big part of that was their pricing. And this is why pricing goes back to the first section in Prepare, because they built their D2C model and they've got, this great product at, $60 US, but there's no margin for the wholesaler.
Right.
And so we really try to figure out from the get-go, how do you build in a way that you can get a wholesaler in there because you're going to need it, a marketplace more than likely, and D2C. And that's, again, it's just leveraging and managing your risks. At some point, e-com isn't going to grow as fast. So how will you pivot your revenue stream? Wholesale, okay? How can you set that up for success? When wholesale starts to take a dive like it did with COVID, those that were able to pivot to D2C found more success. So it's really just about setting up these brands to be as competitive when the winds shift, and they always shift.
Right.
So what do you do? And in our world, for a long time, it was, well, wholesale, they take too much margin. Oh my gosh, Sephora takes 65 points, But the truth is, that is a place of discovery. That is a place where people can touch and try your product. We have to start looking at these different revenue streams in a way that, how do we maximize not just the sale, but where consumers can find us? How can they touch and learn about us? How can we switch them from a competitor? Those all are added advantages that we have to think about in this space.
Yeah, I wish I had remembered this conversation earlier, because that was one of the things that we heard, probably, I guess it was our first GELF back after the pandemic. People were like, well, we're re-engaging with wholesalers, and hey, the terms are better now. It's like, they're not quite as draconian as they used to be, because they knew that they kind of, they got scolded by the D2C boom or something. Anyways, let's talk. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the grow. I know we've only got a couple minutes left here, but this whole acceleration, obviously, a lot of what we like to talk about at GELF is not just the go, but the grow. How do you grow your international sales? So, yeah, wrap up with kind of a couple of words of advice for the audience on that front.
Yeah, I think this is your opportunity to get efficient. And this is where more profitability can come, because you've tested, you've learned, now you can accelerate and accelerate profitably. So you've taken some of those early lumps and early learnings and turning them into bigger opportunities. So looking at whether it's additional geographies, additional channels, just some place that you can go to get that additional acceleration for growth and profitability.
Yeah, and I mean, thinking back to, kind of Ben's, he was talking a lot about Google, talking about Meta, but then he went into the kind of the influencer piece, which we'd been trying to elevate both with the Bamboozer and the conversation, to kind of start wrapping up the day. I guess that influencer marketing piece is part of that acceleration. Obviously, influencer is huge in beauty.
In
from the
beauty, I
beginning,
mean, right now you can't, anybody
OGs.
could open their phone right now and you're going to get bombarded with some beauty item from a beauty influencer. So absolutely, beauty and influencers are part of that acceleration process.
I think the other interesting thing with acceleration, right, is taking it back down to the community level. We were just in Denmark and Scandinavia in the fall, and it was a market that was slow to take on D2C. They weren't as accepting of D2C a few years ago, and then COVID changed that. But now what we're finding is people are still on D2C like we've been talking about all day today, and also going into their local stores, and there's this ability to support the local community, buy local, that you can support by having the wholesale channel, by growing into markets that maybe yet aren't exactly the most D2C friendly. But if you can make your plan where you can maximize both and see where the consumer is today in some of these markets, they want to be local and they still want to be online. So how do you mirror both?
Well, look, the Italians, the French, the Spaniards really do also like and enjoy. It's part of their lifestyle to go out and shop locally. So they also have this entertainment value and enjoy shopping and discovering locally. You can go into the middle of Florence on Saturday afternoon and see families, and they're out shopping together. They're having lunch, they're having coffee. So this shopping experience that they can have one-on-one or as part of a store experience is very different than sitting in their homes and purchasing online. But there is a place for all of those things, because at times they definitely enjoy sitting down and ordering their items and having them delivered to their home. They also don't use cars as much as we do, right? So it's more convenient to have something delivered to them versus going out and purchasing it and walking, in the rain or the snow. So everything's got its place, and it's just about really picking that path.
Right. Okay, well, why don't you give you guys a little plug
Our
here?
book plug. So a few years ago, pre-COVID, funny enough, we actually, when we decided to leave Revlon and start Buzz, we wrote a book called Whip Fire Money. And the goal here was there's so many amazing brands out there looking for support, but they just needed to know how to get started. So Whip Fire Money is a book for beauty brands and really consumer goods looking to go global. And it gives you the foundation information, what is customs and shipping, and how do we think about D2C, and how do we do the price ladder so we can include wholesale and e-com, and all the different little tidbits, plus tons of fun stories of us on the road for the last 2 decades peppered in there. So it's definitely a great resource to just start if you are really kind of, where do I even begin? I feel like a deer in the headlights. It's a good spot.
And if you want to know what the name means, Whip Fire and Money, the cocktail reception is the perfect place.
That's exactly
to talk
what I
about
was saying.
that.
It's like, I'd like
It's
to
the
go
perfect
whip up
place
some
to talk
fire
about that
money
'cause
out
it's a
there.
fun
So,
story.
yes, it is time to, Jim, I guess you were going to close. I want to thank you guys again for joining us. Jim's going to have some closing remarks. We do have some of the meetups. I think you guys might even be getting involved with some of the meetups. So, Jim, I'll let you kind of take us home.
Yeah, that's exactly the last, kind of item here that we wanted to make sure everyone, the meetups are going to be starting right away. We have, some great topics, like if you've already been invited to one, great. Feel free to take a look at, at some of the topics. Join in. It's just part of the networking. It's part of, really the peer meetups. So we certainly encourage you to do so, and the reception bar is also open. So go grab a drink, meet some new people, and I want to thank again Denise and Jessica. This was really interesting, and we hope to have them back soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you outside. Well, that was fun.